Okay, oops, back into it now. We have left, before the mirroring, several steps. The ear, which is quite a deal. It's something that we have to consider pretty closely because the amount of detail in it. For my particular character, if you're doing something cartoony, maybe you could just have extruded it out of the side of the head. I prepared for it on mine because he has a human-esque like ear, or very human-like. Looking at the ear and the reference in the photograph, it's just stretched. Other than that, it's going to look fairly realistic. So we're going to sculpt it in the similar steps that I would adapt for a real ear or a naturalistic looking ear. So this demo, I think it's mostly going to be on the ear, and you could skip over this if doesn't apply to your character, or if it does and you want to do a detailed part of the body like an ear, model it separately and then attach it. That is the strategy. Same thing we've been doing with the hands. The hands are quite complex. Model it separately, manage your CVs and your edge levels, attach it, and that is one piecemeal but effective way to model any character that has kind of like a puzzle coming together. So this will be no different for this year. For lots of different examples of ears out there, you could see the similarity of the pattern that really does bring them together, and perhaps uniqueness. It's like a fingerprint. No two ears are ever the same or ever alike. And if you have a fantasy character that's more cartoony, or perhaps an animal-like ear, maybe that will be less labor for you, less intricacy. How a lot of the complexity in some animal ears or creature-like ears are tucked hidden away, where ours as humans, humanoids, I suppose, are more exposed. Just realize that it is a part of the body that is able to have complexity and does give a lot of character and interest to your design. So in other words, no matter what your design is, don't just leave it off and not think about how you're going to form the ear, because it's such an important characteristic that we see prominently on the face. And you'll need very clear front and side views of such. That is, clear illustrations or drawings before you start designing it, start modeling it. An interesting note for more realistic type ears, genetically, there's some kind of separations for those with attached earlobes and those with detached earlobes. See some varieties here. Just make it however you want. You can aberrate from anything that's known in reality and toward fantasy, or could be accentuated or adornments, something that's organic or mechanical that could modify or link to the ear. Just again, be sure to plan out what kind of ears are right for your character without just popping them in or indifference to them and just as an afterthought, because it's going to bring out more of your characteristics, more of the benefits of the attitude of your character and its design, just like all the other features of the face. So, of course, you can determine the stylization of the ear and the level of detail that fits with your character. Okay, and mine is human or humanoid. It's kind of stretched. So I am going to use a classic template to build the ear, which I'll show you that you can perhaps use too if you have a similar plan. So on my website, linked to week 10, I could also put this on canvas here, but it's simple enough. Building an ear, and I have one for an eye coming later. Building an ear sample here, and I put on the OneDrive different templates for making a realistic ear. Again, you can modify and simplify this for any kind of character's ear. So let's take a look at a few of these. Here I have a picture, this one's my own ear, and I have a template for building something kind of from a flat layout. So this one is a template you can draw right on top of if I want, and use Create Polygon tool absolutely on a flat plane, drawing square to square, edge to edge, extruding and merging to create a network that looks exactly like this, and then extruding out. I even have a quicker way to do that. I have an ear layout already made for you, so it's skipping some of this step if you'd like, and I don't mind it because ears at this flat plane with a flat ear, starting out with this as a flat space of polygons, it would be available to customize into any kind of other ear shape because it's in this very simple original form like this. But even better than that, a few steps ahead, is I have examples in my binaries of a finished ear, a flat, already put together layout, and take it from there. So let me tell you about the process a little bit. Now, this is not my character. This happens to be my ear that I modeled for a different project, but just the steps. Start by cropping in to your design of the ear in the side view. And I have this ear layout template. It's already on my website. In it, it's just simply drawing right on top of this as an image plane and create a polygon and connecting all the parts of this polygon to look like this. Absolutely flat mesh of interconnected polygons. And if you follow exactly this pattern, you'll have the structure ready for you to extrude and create an ear. So you'll get something like this next. So drawing on top of this and connecting and merging all those vertices created this, right? You can see the side by side. All right, then just jumping ahead, you go from this and start sculpting out and you get a stage like this. And of course, looking at your reference, just a quick preview. This is the direction you're going and scaling this fleshy part out, pulling it out, right? And working on some of the interior stuff to extrude faces to match some of the forms here. And then you get to about that stage and just you'll keep working on it. You're going to get to this eventually. This is kind of like a hat a little bit. It wraps all the way around and connects, right? So the ear doesn't attach to the head just as plastered on the side. So an ear like this will only connect in a smaller part, kind of like a bell shape. So eventually you'll arrive at a shape like this, and it's it won't take you long because you have the structure set up pretty nice here. It's not going to take you long to get to that, but just make sure it follows your particular design. You see that it doesn't really stop here. There's an extra part that fans out these polygons, and that is what you attach to the side of the head. It's going to work out best that way. If you try to attach this part, it will look too stuck on there, like a Mr. Potato Head or something like that. If it wasn't for Toy Story, you probably wouldn't know the reference. But yeah, normally the ear is cupping the side of the head to attach to it. It's not stuck in there like an object. So this layout will lead you in the logical direction of creating that. So I have all these available for you. They're stored on the OneDrive and the links on the website. You can see the stages and the wireframe view of where you're going. Also, using the template I provide will give you a predictable amount of CVs around the edges that you have to plan to attach to the side of your head. Remember, just like the hand, they should snap and eventually merge one to one as a combined mesh. So this provides a predictable amount of CVs. This one, on the edge of the ear, it turns out to be about 14 verts on that edge which attaches. And on my head I have about, it looks like 12 CVs around the edge to meet it. So having a discrepancy of a couple, you can find ways to manage that. I think in the end I'll add some. I'm going to add one or two to meet those rather than sacrifice the ear. We'll see when the time comes, but just to have an acknowledgement of the economy of the points coming together. At the same time, it's not something to fret about if you have a slightly different number. If you're planning ahead, you will only have a bit of a discrepancy at all. Okay, this next part can be your choice. You're going to work on just the ear. You're going to get the head out of the way. So you could open a new scene, work on the ear separately, save it, import all that stuff you're finished with into the head scene and combine it. Probably it's easier because this is not such a cluttered scene just to put this on its own layer and work within one scene. No importing, exporting necessary that way. So I'm just going to create a layer and put my head on one layer. And I think I had that eyeball there too. And make that. So now I have the head layer, turn that off. I have the dummy eye, which will be replaced with the more realistic eye later. Turn that off. And I have one for my image planes, but I turned them off in the show. I can bring them back here. Only the side view is going to be useful because it is a quite planar form, the ear. So if I want to bother, I could add a front image plane and a side image plane, clean up the scene and less clutter as possible. Okay, just the side. Okay, now what I'm going to do is save, and then I'm going to bring in an ear. I'm going to import that ear template. Yeah, saving it first for my own good. I know what stage I'm at. I'm going to put ear in there, give it a different version number. Good habits of saving and archiving. Now I showed you in the location on the OneDrive where there's a link to these. These are goodies you can take and import. Everything but the finished ear, right? You can change these templates into any kind of animal or fantasy ear structure because it is lending to it already on the 2D plane, where you couldn't do any of that one size fits all with the face. You could kind of get away with it with the ear. And also there's a storage here for the eye, for the ear, the hair, and other goodies, like I said. So with some body parts, no matter what the design, realistic or fantasy or cartoony, ears and eyes are kind of stretchable. They're kind of plastic. They're kind of customizable to fit where the face needs to be done from scratch. So feel free to utilize this as a kind of boneyard or parts store for importing generic, let's say, objects that you can customize later into yours. This link to the ear is on your website. And we're going to, in here, and we're downloading ear flat exp MB. So we're downloading ear flat exp. Download that to your drive, and then you're going to, I already did that over here on my downloads. Here I have my scene already open, prepared with my guide. Now this is important. You should not say open because it's going to bring a bunch of other crap in Maya you don't want. You just want the ear template that I made so far. So go to import, and for me it's in downloads, and it's called ear flat exp. Okay, that on mine, and I'm going to open that. It says exp for export. That convention I use when I know it's only meant for import and export, because if I said open, it's going to bring so much other stuff that we don't want to clutter the scene and be confusing. So it only brings in the mesh then when you import it and not open it. Okay, so make sure you remember to do that. All right, so that is the ear template we are going to use, and just use it as a foundation to just extrude and build upon. Now we can reverse it, because you can see as it's black, its display needs to be changed to mesh display reverse. Okay, so all we need is to start right off, position it over this here, and you can see that we can quickly become customized with it. It's not going to be perfect, but if we're trying to do this with the face, it would be much more difficult. And the reason it's easy is because it's lying on a flat plane. The ear is very contourous. It has a lot of ins and outs and shapes, but generally it lies more flat on a side plane than our head, which is more cylindrical. And when we get it roughed in as close as we can, then you could go on the components, go each CV, and shimmy those into a better location, seemingly. This character has detached earlobes, so I will talk about that later to plan for it. As I'm doing this, another reminder about workflows and habits and patterns of how you work. Up here, as I mentioned a couple videos ago, you have shown how the modeling toolkit. This modeling toolkit, it's just that it keeps all convenient tools all in one place. Instead of going up here, I see it as sort of a version of the same thing. Whatever you like, whatever you're used to. You can use marking menus, which I've showed you before, to quickly go to different things. It's your own preference and comfort level. I didn't want to ignore that or neglect it, that some of you might enjoy that way. Using the toolkit, it has a lot of goodies tucked in here as well. Component, multi-component mode. Here you're smooth, which you're not going to use too much right now. Maybe later in more refined models, but combine, you're going to use that. Separate, you might not use that for a while. Bevel, you probably won't use that. But here's extrude, very, very common. Bridge, pretty common. Add divisions. That's when you're designing characters with different resolution levels much later in the game. And other kinds of tools. A multi-cut, remember, that's for repair only, for surgery. Target weld. Quad draw is a really neat thing. Quad draw is really useful when you already have a mesh and you want to simplify it into quads. And you have a live reference mesh to draw on top of. I can show you that kind of stuff later, or connect. So all of this could be a real powerhouse in Toolkit if you want to start using it. I figure show you a couple tools and go back to them. So that's why I've been reaching right off the shelf to get some of this stuff. And what I do, I don't think anything's more quicker than a gesture. So I just grab right vertex right there. Right face right there. I think that's quicker than even reaching over to any of this. But as far as an operational tool, something that's an action, I usually put myself on a shelf because it's just as quick for me to go over here than over here. It's just as habit. It's just as preference. There's no right or wrong way. But I didn't want to ignore this all the same if you really like using the modeling toolkit. You know, and other stuff you may be wondering about, Boolean and separate. Those aren't very useful in organic stuff. It's more when you're really modeling spaceships or vehicles or stuff that doesn't need to be too formed. Boolean is when you interpenetrate two objects, add, subtract, intersection of two objects hitting each other. You know, some of these others, mostly you're not going to use very often in more organic character modeling, but most of them you would. So they're good to know they're there, and you could habituate them into your practice if you like. And if you haven't tried any of these toolkits, you can tear and return in and out. You see how you can arrange any way you want. Be creative in how you do this. The full thicker bar, you can get both of them. You can drag these off in the thinner bar there, put more and more in there. Everybody's workspace might look differently as you become more advanced at Maya and whatever's good for you. And if things seem to get too haywire, you have these safe buttons right here. Just click it. Returns to the 4 view. Okay, and dragging those panels back into the thick blue bar. And reminding that we have all these workspaces set that could reframe and focus you on whatever task you're doing. Maya is so intimately customizable. You have modeling, standard, and expert. And some folks have been, you know, that's all they do for the job is modeling, is they can turn off everything. What I did there is control spacebar. Just control spacebar. And it turns off all the menus to maximize the screen space, and you could just only use marking menus. You could design all of these, or gestural menus, or hotbox, and you can build on the hotbox, which is of course holding the space bar, and not using any menus because it's cluttering up your workspace. So it depends on if you do this professionally or how advanced you're going to get. Just in one class, maybe you wouldn't embark on that, but if you're modeling for weeks or months or years, you'd probably be at some point very, very gestural and very open workspace as all that you would want hidden unless at your fingertips. So again, to return it back, it's just control and spacebar together. All right, some bit nudges and tweaks on what I have here. So I'm lining up this template closely with the shadows and the creases and the cartilage that are on this particular ear, and you see that it wants to already align. And just take advantage of that in your own ear with this baked in kind of structure. And once you get that as good as you can, just eyeballing it, you really don't have to look in any other views. You just have that side view to worry about. All right, now it would be great to have 3/4 reference. We can't really see anything on the side. We don't have it in this case, so we're just going to have to make it up. Maybe you drew a turnaround of your character, which would be great. You have that extra input, feedback for how you should do it. But I'm going to do some guesswork here, and what I'll do next in this stage is I'm going to, well, let me fix this a little bit too. This should be like, start going concave here, just about there. And this part, by the way, that part should be the ear hole where it leads to the eardrum. So this should be more tucked away here. Start going back like that. You see? All right. Okay, next I'm going to grab that face, that, hitting shift. If I want, I could use the paint tool to paint selected faces. It's easy enough just to grab them. And now if the ear was attached ear, I wouldn't select that. If it's a earlobe, I meant to say. If it's attached earlobe, leave it like that. If it's a detached earlobe, you might want to select all of these. Okay, then extrude that. Then X, Y, and Z scale in the attributes, middle mouse button drag. And now pull them out a bit. It's funny because it already, just with that little move, starts looking like an ear. Or some sort of a dish, maybe not an ear quite yet. Okay, so next you could probably take some of this. You see the darkened parts, the more the sunken parts in the ear inside of reference. These could go inward. Just push them. Maybe not extrude yet. Just push a little bit. Push a little bit like that. That's enough. Not too much. You shouldn't do that too much. Just a little bit like that. And then you could extrude it a little bit more. Scale a little bit more. Don't go too crazy. Just a little bit. You don't want to add too many. What's good about this is you're not adding any cost to the edge of CVs because you're duplicating or extruding the inner square faces, so it's not putting a higher count of CVs. Okay, and let's keep looking. This part right here, you see how it's sunken in like that? Sunken in around the edges. We can push this in just a little bit. And I think this part sunken in just a little bit more. If you don't have to extrude, don't do it. You don't have to, like, okay, that's fine, it's going to survive and it's going to look good. There's no reason to extrude any more of that. But what I could do is put a little curve. You see how there's a little shadow here? Darkness there, a little curve going on there to simulate that. And maybe this edge is getting a little too sharp. So you see that it's kind of needing a little bit of softening. You certainly could play with these edges and lines quite a while to get a more predictable look to the ear. Now that face right there, that part of the ear could be moved in a little bit depending on how deep you want that to look. It's possible, yes, you could extrude and put that in, or it might be overkill. Maybe you don't need that much, but to get that fold that's happening in here, you know what I'm saying? Right here, it's hard really to get harder cartilage creases unless you extrude more lines. Consider how close you're going to see it. Maybe it's not necessary. I think I'm going to leave that out of mine. I'm going to undo. Like that's fine. I am going to take this edge right here and push it in a little bit. I'm more trying to catch the light around the contours of the inner ear. Let's say the inner, the external part of the ear, I should say, rather than trying to make it look identical to this. And yeah, I'm working a lot on it in the perspective view because it's just pretty safe here. I'm not in jeopardy of really distorting the points too badly. Again, because it's so flat, it's lying rather flat on a plane comparatively to other multidimensional things you may be modeling. So, yeah, bearing it back. The ear here seems to have two ridges, and that's true with most ears too. If you feel your own ear, you're going to have a ridge here, and this one is going to ridge out too. So you can try moving this out, and it's going to cause this kind of unique thing. So what some do here is they extrude another time right there. Somewhat optional, somewhat negligible in detail whether you'd have to do that or not. Let me back up and make better space for that before I do. So the lesson in all of this, not to be lost, whatever software, 3D software you're using to model, is layout. That's going to stand test of time. The edges and how they're swooping around and curling around and form-fitting the organic details of the character is so determinate how everything's going to be built outward. So that template of the ear already had that in it, and to follow it is saving you so much time. Make sure you have good plans for how the detail of the layout is going to happen before you do it. Otherwise, you could be spending hours just pushing around faces, pushing around CVs, and getting something that's just not satisfactory, and you'll get really, really frustrated with Maya. So planning the layout before you start clicking is going to be just everything between peaceful, happy working and insanity of trying to make everything look good when you have a bad foundation of the layout. When you have a nice layout, it's actually becoming fun to model. It should be fun anyway, but it's the least intuitive thing if you compare it to how you model with or I should say ZBrush more than Mudbox. But this nature of building from the ground up and with Mesh and Maya is going to serve you in so many cases to make very animatable characters. All right, so we are going to extrude this in. That's the eardrum, and you'll notice that it's strange that if the light catches this, it won't look too flat, like filled in ears. So we're actually going to extrude this in and pull it back to represent the eardrum. I'm going to back up. You could do you could do more around it if you want, depending on the style of your characters. But for this one, it's just going to be that. I'm going to maybe scale it up a little bit more and then extrude that in and push it straight back and then push it like that. Because if you feel, your own eardrums, put your finger in your ear or something, you can feel that it doesn't go straight into your brain. It goes back, toward, it goes inward, and then it points actually toward, blocking any damage that can just float in your ear. It actually comes back to the front of your face. Of course, it's a long journey and a pattern there, but this is what I'm doing. And I really don't need that face right there because no one will ever see it. So I'm just pulling that in and pulling it back to create what's going to be shadowed there. And this should be pulled a little bit like this in a space for a eardrum. Let's call it the canal for the eardrum. So going like that, I probably don't want it, the whole facing like that. Just going to shrink it down and pull it that way. See what I'm saying? So you don't see it from the side, but there's a darkening in there indicating a canal. It's going to look more correct. So now I'm trying to catch that shape a little bit, pushing and pulling faces. I haven't had to add too many new extrusions. Just a little bit of work. Don't want it to look too busy either. It's just an impression of what a real ear looks like. I do want to simplify it a little bit, characterize it. I'm not showing this as a hyper-realistic, but somewhat surrealistic face and head. And when I jump to 1 mode, you could see I'm really pushing the CVs. I'm pushing the edges. It's getting a bit chaotic. Some places maybe a little bit more than others, but I don't want to do any more stretching than that. I'm trying to get creases and folds in the cartilage without adding any more edges around or extruding, and I'm pushing it to the max here, so I probably will stop there, do a little bit more, and then come back and smooth the areas where I need. You also might want to look something from a long view And from a close, it looks really different in my eye, but when you back off, it's going to look different still. The more you look at ears and hands, the weirder they appear. So that's kind of a truth of observation. Okay, I'm going to stop messing with this right now, and I'm going to do the back side. You remember how it looked like a bell curling over in the mesh? That's what's needed to complete, and of course to attach the ear eventually. So I'm going to do that step now. So it's a pretty easy one, just to grab one edge and hit the right arrow, and boom, you have all of that edge ring selected, and that's what you need. So first you're going to do, after the selection, is one extrusion. Let me get it back. I think it goes about there. Okay, just do one extrusion and pull it back all the way here, and then here's my recommendation. Pull it to about here and deselect these right here. These are going to flatten out a little bit more. What do I mean by that, flatten out here? Well, here, looking at this finished ear again, can you see how it's extruded around the edge just a couple more times in this bowl shape or plunger shape, and here it really flattens out, right? Here it flattens out as well, but not so much as it does here, because of the contour of the back and the cheek are different angles. And I hope that makes sense. So let's go back to that extrusion. I'm going to select that whole ring on the very outer edge, and I'm going to deselect some of these, and we'll first select all of them, I should say. Scale it up a little more like that. Maybe even out a little more like that, kind of like that, right? Alright, now I'm going to deselect by hitting Control and selecting. It deselects. I'm going to deselect some of these and then scale those inward. See what I mean? Like that. And that is getting that shape, which is nice and plunger shaped as I was aiming for. Okay, and this might need a little bit extra flattening. Just make sure on the other side you're not penetrating other areas that you don't want to be. Okay, you might have to custom tweak some of these. It looks a bit. Here, as we mentioned, it's a detached earlobe, so here's where you're going to let that free, open for the earlobe to dangle and not attach to the head. Needs to be free. Okay. All right. Bring that in a little bit. Okay, then you could grab the whole ring again, extrude maybe one more time. So like that, and extrude one more time. Similarly, you could do this outstretch here. You could deselect these, or whatever you like, and then scale it in, and then massage all the points in the CVs to a place that looks natural. These obviously have to come down. Okay, take a little bit of maneuvering, and if you just feel on the side of your own head, just speaking naturalistically, there's not really a ridge too much right here. Maybe there's a little bit of a flap here. Like, you could extrude a flap to make that thing, you know what I'm saying, this part that flaps inward on your ear, that, again, optional to your design. You could do something like that. Of course, this inner edge is a little bit stuck in too much to be softer. You could do something like that, and so it doesn't look too complex or cluttered in there. Simplify this. I could take the smooth tool to this, would look pretty good. But this part is melting in to the side of the head. We really don't have anything like this. So if the current design, it wants to give you like that, that's going to look like Mr. Potato Head again. So it shouldn't be stuck in. It should be kind of flat like that. And that's why I spanned out these edges to make them fan out like that. You see the slope? It's kind of sloping in here, where here it's very pronounced and edgy. Even if you have a cartoony ear, you can mess with that a little bit to make it look better. And also, when I look in the side view, I don't have a good reference for it, but I know that it's not that stiff and vertical. So just eyeballing it, I'm going to put some jazz on it to make it look, you know, more human. You could rotate it, rotate a little bit this way. Just more imperfect. Just make sure you're not penetrating other areas of sticking through. That won't look good. Okay, we're getting really close. You might want to give a little bit of a under tuck here, because there's a lip around that. Yes, I could extrude those extra faces. I'm just leave it as an illusion that there's more space undercut than there is. Just strategic, slight movements of edges to help with that. Getting too tight with detail. It's really a game of less is more and strategic placement. Okay, for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to wind up here. Just take a quick spin around and make sure there's no parts poking through each other, something telltale like this, which you might not notice till later, which would be a bummer. If it's hidden, you can't see it. Who cares if it's in the ear canal? But if something's standing out, hit it good old one mode and realize like how jazzy and chaotic it may be getting. You know, I really stretched and pulled it here to its max. But I didn't want to add any more edges to it because I know it's coming in to match the head, even though the detail is going to be mostly on the flat part of the ear, on the inner part where it won't add to the edge count. I still have no reason to do a really detailed ear if I don't have a real close-up. So I'm aiming for like a medium shot. So this is good. I'm going to wind up here, and maybe I'll go one extra step before ending the video, and that's importing it into the next shot. So what I'll do is show you next quick how to save it and import it into the next shot if you have it separately. In mine, I have the head already right here, but you know, I don't have to worry about attaching it. But let's say my head were in a different shot. This is going to be saved for the other video to attach it to the head. But let's say you model this separately in a scene. Just make sure a couple things if you did that. Make sure you delete by type history, and make sure you save it as an export. Don't save as scene. You save it as an exported file. So you say export selection, make sure of course you select the mesh, export selection, and then save it as ear. I like to put exp. I'll put Larry. Alright, something like that. Alright, so if again you had all your body parts separated into different Maya scenes, why would you do that? Well, you might be working on a laptop that's really operating slow, and you're forced to do that. So if you keep everything in the same scene, and you have everything on layers, and you're wondering why Maya's crashing a lot, that is why, probably. So depending on your accessibility to the instruments you need to do the project, or the speed of your computer, of whatever you have, a laptop or anything available. You might have to separate this part from this part in a different Maya scene, build it, and then save each part. I'd have the head as the main file. You could save as head, but then save that separately, and of course build the ear in a new scene, brand new scene with no head in it, construct it there, and export it, and then import it in the head scene. You get what I mean. You might be cornered into doing that if you're running really, really slow. Interactivity is very, very slow. So that is an important aspect to talk about in this wrap-up. Other than that, let's save it for the next video for actually attaching the ear.